Now then, it's Burnsy. Welcome to our regular Curiosity podcast, the CuriosityCast. Every episode we take questions asked by members of the public in Hull and try to get them the best answers from the very best brains in the city of Hull. Not all questions are about Hull. We go beyond Hull, and they can be about whatever you want to discover, so do send us your questions. This episode we're getting political. We have an election coming up in Hull and East Yorkshire to determine who will be the very first mayor for the region. And it should be a significant thing, this role. It has a budget attached. And this election will determine who's spending your money and on what for the next few years. Let's talk to the man who will have his finger on the pulse. Journalist Angus Young joins us to unpick what this election is all about and what it means for every one of us. Angus, as always, nice to see you. Welcome to the Curiosity Cast. What do we get from a mayor? What are we going to get in terms of bang for our buck? What can we expect?
Well, this is all about devolution, David. It's handing responsibility, decision-making and funding from Whitehall and central government to local government, and in particular a devolved Mayoral Combined Authority, which is a bit of a mouthful, but that's where we are. And in this case, it's Hull and East Riding joining together in a combined authority to be led by a mayor. And the government deal that was initially proposed by the last government and then continued by this government and agreed on was for £400 million over the next 30 years, which sounds like a lot of money, and it is £400 million, but actually if you split it on an annual basis, it's about £13 million a year coming to this region from the government. And then there'll be extra money on top of that in various funding pots that mayors up and down the country can bid into.
Right. So what does the mayor do then? What decisions are they allowed to make?
Well, the mayor's responsibilities in this part of the world will cover issues such as transport, economic development, adult education, skills, and then big sort of strategic issues that cover things like coastal erosion, how to plan for that, and flood management, which is obviously a big issue in this part of the world.
So this isn't stuff that was originally handled by the council, is it? It's stuff that was handled by government?
Well, a bit of both, really. Yes, the council sort of implemented things on the ground, but received government money for it. And this is a way of getting that government money locally, if you like, to determine sort of local priorities. And you've still got the two councils, Hull and East Riding, will continue in their own separate entities, delivering day-to-day services such as bin collection, social services, libraries, that sort of thing.
You've answered Pauline Hesel's question. Does it mean we're getting just one big council for Hull and the East Riding? So who's going to be more important, the mayor or the councils?
I think from a profile point of view, I think the mayor will probably be more important because the idea really is to have somebody who will sort of be a regional leader and have a high profile promoting the region on a national level. So think, for instance, Greater Manchester. You've got Andy Burnham as the mayor there. Pretty much he's a national figure. He's a known face, but you'd struggle to know the 11, 12 council leaders that make up the Manchester Combined Authority. So those sort of regional figures, more clout, more presence on a national stage, if you like.
Was it more like an American model then? Because they seem to have more mayors with more power in America, don't they?
They do. It's slightly different, and you could argue that the powers that they're having are slightly truncated because just geographically, it's Hull and East Riding. It's quite a small area, really. It's this whole devolution journey for this part of the world started off over 10 years ago when they were talking about a Yorkshire Combined Authority covering the whole of Yorkshire and one Yorkshire mayor. And that would have covered a population larger than the size of Scotland, which, remember, has got devolution. It's got its own government. And, of course, things sort of filtered down from that idea of a Yorkshire Combined Authority. That got swept away. Then it was a Humber Combined Authority. That got swept away because the South Bank didn't want to join with the North Bank. And so we're left with a relatively small geographical area.
The old rivalries. You mentioned Andy Burnham. Andy in Beverley wanted to know, will this mayor have similar powers to Andy Burnham in Manchester? One of the things he did was bring the buses back into public ownership. Could our mayor do that?
Yes, it is one of the powers that are being transferred down to local level. It's happening in West Yorkshire as well, where the Tracy Brabin is the mayor. But it's taken Andy Burnham 8 years to get to this point of taking the buses back into some sort of public ownership. So it's not an overnight job, and of course we've yet to actually get a mayor. So if that is a priority for the new mayor coming in, then the wheels will be put in motion.
We've got very good. That I like that.
Yeah.
He delivered that day really dryly, didn't he? And then it clicked. He's done a little pun there, Angus.
I said, never mind the buses, bring back the trams. We should never have got rid of the trams.
Don't start on that. We'll be on to monorails and all sorts soon. I've done these. I'm glad it's not a phone in. We'd be getting texts and calls saying, let's have a monorail.
No, the old trams were brilliant.
It's not. Yeah, okay.
They were.
Well, and in fairness, they've got trams in Manchester and everything like that anyway, haven't they?
Yeah,
So, where was I going to go? So, Andy, but are any of the candidates, and I promise we should come to the candidates in a minute, are any of them promising to bring the buses back into public ownership?
Well, it's very early days in terms of policies from the candidates. Some have put out very basic policies, nothing mentioned particularly on buses as such. But it is a given within the deal, is that they can a mayor can progress towards public ownership for public transport, setting up what is called a strategic transport authority.
You say it's quite early. The election's on the 1st of May, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
We're not that. Shouldn't we be hearing some policies? All I know at the moment, in terms of having done a little bit of research, is that Yorkshire Party candidate Rowan Halstead, his favourite biscuit is a custard cream, and the Green Party candidate Kerry Harrison, favourite biscuit is a hobnob. I don't know too much more about the candidates. Give us the list of
we
candidates.
should say that we've got fig rolls here today, so I think we're already beating those two parties.
And it's become a thing. It's become a thing on social media. Producer Dave's biscuits at the CuriosityCast.
I did see yesterday, I think it was, Andrea Jenkin, who was running in Lincolnshire, saying that she was going to get rid of the bridge tolls. So presumably she'd have to work with whoever won in Hull and East Riding to do that.
Well, again, that is another part of the requirement of the deal, is for the mayor on this side of the water to work with the mayor on the other side of the water, because, as I said before, the Humber combined authority idea went south, and so we're going to end up with effectively two mayors for the wider region, and there has got to be a working between the two, because there are cross-estuary issues, I suppose, particularly economic development and port-related issues. And, of course, we've got a bridge which connects the two together with a toll on. But it might be very well for Andrea Jenkins to talk about abolishing the toll, and a lot of people would maybe support that. But you got to pay for the upkeep of the bridge.
It's worth noting she didn't say how she was going to do it.
And the bridge board, just to complicate matters, is a completely different entity to what will be the new combined authority. So
you said Andrea Jenkins talking rubbish. We're trying to be fair and equitable today, but I'm pinning Angus down on this.
To be fair,
she would have to be then elected and then deliver on a priority, wouldn't she?
Get agreement from a counterpart on the North Bank. To be fair, when I used to do a phone-in, it was one of my favourite topics. Why? It's a barrier to mobility.
Can we use it as an example? If she says that and she says, "Here's how I'm going to pay for it," would she then have to go back to government to approve it, or has she got the power now to do that?
No, she hasn't got the power, and we would have to require all sorts of legislation, as we've seen in the past with various other deals that have been done over the bridge toll, because it's a government debt that's to be repaid on the bridge, which I think runs out in about 2030 something.
So the powers would be limited then?
It would be limited from a mayoral point of view. She or the mayor in Hull would have to then persuade the government to do a deal.
Only an example. We're not saying Andrea Jenkins is going to win or anything, are we?
No.
Well, we wait and see. She's south of the river anyway. Yeah. So let's talk about the candidates. Who we got here at the moment, because it's still open. But if you're coming in late now, you're not going to win. And I can't find a place to put my CV.
There's still time, Dave, for nominations to go in end of the month. So we could, either of you, the two Daves here, could stand for mayor if they wanted to.
It'd be like the two Ronnies without the laughs.
the Scar and Lager party.
Yeah.
So we've got two council leaders standing. We've got Mike Ross in Hull. He's standing for the Lib Dems, and we've got Anne Handley, who's the leader in the East Riding Council, standing for the Conservatives. And if either of those two actually win, they would have to resign their roles as council leaders, because
right.
that again is part of the rules. You can't be a council leader and the mayor. So if either of those two actually won, then there would be a change of leadership.
You're ahead of the game. You're ahead of the game here, because Mike from Hornsey wanted that question answered on the Curiosity. You bang on it. So they would have to go. So we've got two council leaders. Who else have we got?
Sorry to interject. Do you think they're standing because they already have a kind of the publicly known? Because that's a big thing for this election, isn't it? Who do we know? Do we trust?
Might be a bigger gig. It's higher profile, as Angus was saying.
But they're going into it with a high profile to begin with. Yeah. Do you see what I mean? Is that why they've been selected?
Well, they've both been selected by the parties. I think a limited selection process, but they've both put their names forward and been chosen, obviously. And yes, they do have high profiles, and they understand the process and the nuances, because effectively for the last year, 2 years, they've been at the forefront of the negotiations with the government to get this deal. So they have probably, out of all the candidates, a much better grasp and understanding of what it all entails.
Have they sort of created their own job, as it were?
You could say that. They've certainly been at the coalface, shall I say?
Okay, but So if whoever the mayor is could go in their office and say, no, we're doing that, I don't care what you say as the leader of Hull City Council, that's what I'm doing.
Well, there has to be, the way that it's been structured, and it's a bit dull, this, but the way it's been structured is that, yes, the mayor has ultimate responsibility, but there is a combined authority that sort of sits there. So when the mayor gets elected, there will be if you like, a mini cabinet of 4 other councillors, 2 from each council, and 4 independent people from the business sector. Well, 3 from the business sector, and the police and crime commissioner will sit on that cabinet, and there has to be a majority vote within that cabinet for anything that actually happens.
All right. So is it another layer of bureaucracy?
Yes, it is another layer of bureaucracy.
Right,
not a huge
usual faces.
Not a huge layer, but yes, the usual faces. I'll just finish off with the candidate.
Yeah,
sorry.
We should think positive as well. It's more bureaucracy, but he's done a lot of good in Manchester, as Andy Bailey.
So
that extra layer of bureaucracy, he's actually done some good.
Yeah,
sorry, Angus, other candidates.
Yeah, other candidates, just to finish off the list. So we've got those two, the 2 council leaders. We've got Labour, we've got Margaret Pinder, who stood a couple of times in parliamentary elections for Labour. Most recently coming very close to beating Graham Stewart last year in Beverley and Holderness. And then we've got Luke Campbell, who is standing for reform, and obviously a lot of hoo-ha and publicity about his launch a couple of weeks ago in Hull.
The Olympic boxing champion from Hull.
And then we've got, as you mentioned, the 2 biscuit candidates, Kerry Harrison for the Green Party and Rowan Halstead for the Yorkshire Party.
Yeah, it's only because I saw, when I was looking down, that they, for some reason, on the site I looked on, mentioned their favourite biscuits. I don't want to denigrate the quality of the
I can't believe the other candidates won't chip in at some point, because this is all the public want to know.
Luke Campbell's fascinating. In politics generally, populist candidates are getting in. Has he got, he's never been in politics in his life. Has he got a chance?
He has got a chance. If you judge the public opinion polls nationally, there has been some publicity recently about the betting that's going on for this particular election in Hull on East Riding, and he's supposedly the favourite with the bookies, but he hasn't got any experience whatsoever in politics. And
is it a job you can do without experience in politics?
I would say not really. To be kind to Luke, but I would say no, not really. You've got to have some sort of grasp of what's going on, and we've talked about the 2 council leaders who've been heavily involved in the negotiations and how it all works. You've got to have some sort of grounding on public service, public administration, local government.
So it's his high profile,
just to really understand what's going on. Yeah,
but if he sits, as you say, in a committee at the head of a committee, that experience will be behind him and alongside.
Well, yes, he'll have a very small officer team as well that's been proposed to sort of guide him, if you like. But it's I would suggest it's a huge risk to have somebody like Luke in charge of it, because it's a 4-year gig, so he's got to stick with it for 4 years, and if he does get elected.
If you look at somebody like the Labour candidate, she's a lawyer trained at Harvard. If you look at the Liberal candidate, he's run Hull City Council. Luke Campbell's a boxer.
It's a bit. People have asked me this, and I would say the analogy would be: would Mike Ross go into the ring with Tommy Coyle for 12 rounds? Probably not.
Not if there's any sense.
I'd chip in.
So why would really Luke go into something like this? I don't know. It's
why has he? Because it's high profile. He will get votes.
I can say it at a council level if he wants to, if you wanted to sort of stand at a council level, but this is really going in at the deep end.
Is it, as some people are saying, that there'd be people pulling the strings and he'd just be the figurehead?
Well, yes, there's that. I mean, one of the other parts of the deal is that whoever gets selected as a mayor can appoint a political advisor, which would be a full-time role. So they would effectively help the mayor in their role.
Coyle.
But again, with the greatest respect in the world, Reform UK haven't got a lot of people on the ground locally who've got any type of experience in terms of running public administration and budgets of this size. In fact, they've got very little experience. In fact, only recently, one of the two Reform councillors in these ridings just resigned from the party. So it's a huge ask, and I think a lot of people would be a bit nervous as to how it all went, really, with a completely inexperienced person, whether it's Luke Campbell or anybody else with zero experience of running something like this.
In that case, we've mentioned most of the candidates, and to get a bit more serious than favourite biscuits, Rowan Halstead for the Yorkshire Party and Kerry Harrison, have they got political experience for the Green Party?
No, they haven't, not in terms of an elected role. They're just members of their respective parties, and I would, again, respectfully suggest are very much outsiders in terms of the running order, in terms of how their parties have fared in local elections recently. What I would say, it's very, very, very hard to predict what's going to happen. I've covered local elections for the best part of 40 years in this part of the world, and this is the first election where I honestly can't really accurately predict what's going to happen.
It's like the Cheltenham Festival last week, really, and all the favourites were tumbling and outsiders were coming. You don't know it's going to happen. We'll see what happens. This, by the way, is the CuriosityCast. Angus Young is our guest today. We're talking about the first ever political election for a mayor for Hull and the East Riding. It is significant. I'll just remind you generally that you can send us your own question and we'll answer it either in the next podcast or in the content you can find on the Curiosity social feeds. There's some wonderful stuff on there. So message us at www.curiosity. I forgot a dot there. www. Or even www. 3 W's and a dot.
How many Sony awards?
Yeah, curiosityhull.co.uk. Well, the thing is, I'm reading it. Or find Curiosity Hull on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Blue Sky. Liz in Brough, HU15, asks an interesting question, Angus. Isn't this whole thing a complete waste of time?
Go on, Liz.
I think.
Don't mess about, Liz.
No, I think a lot of people might wonder what it's all about. And I think the important thing in terms of the election is that people need to get out and vote, because unfortunately we've seen a lot of low turnouts in elections recently, and I suspect there will be a low turnout in this one. Which I looked it
up. The last council elections, the turnout in Hull was 21.43. So that's a fifth of people.
Yeah,
bothering to vote.
Yeah. I expect a similar sort of turnout in this one. I think if it gets over 20%, it would be doing well, and that's a bit of a worry because, like you say, a lot of people will not vote. But we're talking about a lot of public money here that's going to be spent, and a lot of responsibility, and
on a lot of public-facing projects as well, isn't it? Transport is very public-facing.
Indeed,
so it's
indeed, and a lot of. In the grand scheme of things, it's £13 million a year. It might sound a lot, but it's not really. We were talking in the last podcast that we did about bridges, and Chapman Street Bridge in Hull needs £7 million spending on it just to get it working again. Now, if you put that against a £13 million budget for the whole of Hull and East Riding in the year, that sort of maybe gives you some idea of where it is. But it's still a fair chunk of money. And like I say, there's other government funding pots that will be available to dip into.
And presumably, whoever gets the job will also be able to say to Hull and the East Riding Councils, well, if you put your money in with that, then we can do this as a scheme. Yes.
Yeah, and they
couldn't force it, but they could ask.
And they can put money into infrastructure projects that will then bring in, lever in, as they say, private sector money.
I was going to say, can they ask for private sector money on top of the
Indeed, I mean, they can use some money to, kickstart a development site by putting some money into do decontamination or putting in roads and drainage and that sort of thing.
Brings up Houchin, of course, in Middlesbrough, was it?
Teesside,
yeah. Well, one of the other powers that have been handed down that may not come is the power to create a development corporation, which would the one was set up in Teesside, and some of the other mayoral authorities are looking at it. I think there's one in Manchester, and the development corporation would effectively become the regional regeneration company to develop particular sites. So, St Andrew's Dock, for instance, could be at somewhere down the line, could be a target for a mayoral development corporation.
Business is hugely important, and you said there would be 3 business people on the committee?
Yes, there's 3.
Do we know who they're going to be?
No, not yet.
And would it be in the public interest, Angus, if we knew, and the mayor presumably chooses those 3, would it be in the public interest for all of them to declare the 3 business people I'm going to bring with me are?
I think, as I understand it, those business people are independently nominated by the what's called a skills board that's already in existence in a sort of shadow form.
God, there's a lot of layers to
this.
this.
But there will be familiar faces, I should imagine.
But I think Dave's right. Who do they answer to, these business people? The skills board answer to who?
Well, they don't really answer to anybody. Private sector representatives on public bodies are part of that public body as such, and ultimately it would be the mayor's responsibility for them to essentially behave themselves. But they will have, initially, there will be non-voting. They won't have any vote. They'll just be
there for their expertise.
Right. It'll be up to the mayor and the councillors to decide at some point whether they should be given voting rights. But the proposal at the moment is for them to be in a non-voting capacity.
Just going back to when we might actually get some sort of policies from the candidates. When are you expecting them? When are we getting a manifesto or, this is what I'm going to do?
Well, hopefully they should be dropping through people's letterboxes fairly shortly. I've had a couple of sort of newsletters and pamphlets through my letterbox, and they will be doing the media rounds hopefully as well to set out some sort of vision and some sort of policy.
Is anybody at this point proposing anything revolutionary or anything that's caught your eye or ear and you thought, aye, that's interesting, that'll go down well, or blimey, what they're talking about?
The 2 things have captured my attention. One, Anne Handley, the Conservatives, has stated fairly clearly, and some stuff that I've seen through my letterbox and publicly, that she will not be increasing any council tax through the mayor's office, because the mayor does have the power to put a preset on the council tax, a bit like the police. And she said there will be no council tax.
At what level could they put it up? So this will be an additional cost to the ratepayers. Yeah. To what extent? What's the limit?
I don't know what the limit is, to be honest, but she said that her policy is not to have a precept to raise extra money for the mayoral authority as such. So that is a definitive policy, and I would expect probably certainly the more politically savvy candidates to say pretty much the same, because it's not exactly a vote winner to say that you're going to put the council tax up as soon as you get in. Yeah. The other thing that's struck me, and again going back to Luke Campbell, is that at the moment he's policy free. There isn't any policies being mentioned at all by Luke at all. And
it's weird. He stood on the banks of the Humber with Andrea Jenkins, and she said, "I'm going to get rid of the bridge tolls." And he didn't say a word. So presumably he would have to announce the same policy if he agrees with it.
Well, you would think so. I mean, there's still plenty of time for people to put forward their policies in some sort of detail, but you would think in a normal world, after a big jazzy launch at a big arena, you might come up with a few initial headline-grabbing ideas, but at the moment it's a tumbleweed.
Okay. Is anybody grabbing the headlines at the moment?
Well, I think the Luke Campbell launch certainly grabbed the headlines. Then it's gone a bit quiet again. I expect things, once the candidates are actually officially in place and the nominations are in, which is, as I say, by the end of the month, I think throughout next month, April, we'll hear a lot more about them.
Okay. 1st of May this year is the election, so do get involved in it. Listening to Angus, it is significant. It could make a decent difference to this area. Will we have this from Danielle in HU20, which is Cottingham and surrounds? Will we have access to the mayor? Can we ring up and get in a meeting with him or her? Oh, go for it, Danielle.
Will they have an office? We could go knock on the door.
Well, I'm sure they'll have an office, probably a very small one, because as I said, there's going to be a very small team involved in it. I suspect they'll probably work out of one of the two council buildings, because I think one of the pushes from the two councils, from both councils, is to try and keep this as skinny as possible in terms of cost and setup. They have been given a certain amount of money. I think it's up to £1.5 million for cover the running costs for the first couple of years from the government. But I think the idea is to try and keep it skinny, because I think a big bloated organisation sort of taking over straight away wouldn't look particularly great in this time of continuing austerity.
Are we going to see all the trappings of power? Are we going to see the limos and all that sort of guff?
No,
sorry, guff. Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Is somebody can somebody go large on this?
Fancy trainers.
I don't think so, but you will get a salary with it. I haven't seen
what's it pay.
I haven't seen what the salary is, but I suspect it'll be at least, if not more, than what the council leaders are on at the moment. So
roughly, then.
Well, I would think maybe 40,000-50,000, something like that.
Maybe more than that.
Maybe more. I don't know.
Because the police and crime commissioner was 75 grand, wasn't it? So it's going to be six figures, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean,
blows dust off CV.
you will have a sort of a chief executive sort of style officer person alongside as well, who will probably have a larger salary than the mayor, perhaps.
Right.
And of course, the mayor can get voted out of office after 4 years rather than, so it's not a job for life, really.
But you want to pay a decent wage to attract the right candidate, don't you?
Well, I think there is an independent remuneration process where the salaries are looked at. They'll look at other salaries of other mayors around the country and then come to some sort of decision. It won't be the mayor deciding her own salary.
But going back to the original Daniel's original question, will they be holding surgeries, for instance? If you don't know about premises and all that, do you think, is it like an MP really, or is it they don't work on that level?
Yeah, I think it's more strategic. So you won't be having sort of drop-in surgeries to tell us about your pothole problem down your 10-foot. But I think there will be an onus on being fairly sort of public and fairly sort of visible. So I think there'll be a lot of
look north appearance.
It'll be on the telly a lot.
On the telly,
with the territory,
and a lot of high profile speaking at events and business leaders and things like that.
I'm coming back to my original thought. Is this good for the area? I think lots of people have, lots of people haven't, have wanted more collaboration between Hull and the East Riding. Can see the benefits of it. Is this a good thing for the area if we get the right candidate, if we vote the right person in?
I think the concept's good. I think it's been watered down a little bit in terms of my own personal feeling. I think it should have probably been a Humber-wide authority to give it a bit more clout and a bit more oomph and a bit more just economies of scale.
I agree.
But yes, I think it's got to be good for the region. It's a bigger world out there than just little silos of Hulls and East Ridings.
Angus, as always, thank you for your time and your insight. It's going to be fascinating. 1st of May 2025. And if you're listening to the Curiosity Cast and think this doesn't affect you, it does.
Get out and vote.
This person will have control over some aspect of your life and your kids' lives and their future. That's it for this episode of Curiosity Cast. Our thanks to Angus Young. I suppose the main lesson to be learned with all this is that the new mayor will have power over your life. There you go. Remember, you can ask questions and seek answers on the Curiosity website. let's see if I can get it right, www.curiosityhull.co.uk, or follow and friend us on the socials where we're Curiosity Hull on all the main feeds. There's loads of wonderful stuff on there. We'll be back very soon with more quality answers to whatever question you'd like to ask.